Good morning. Officially call to order the board meeting of Coachella Valley Water District Board of Directors, 8 a.m. Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. See a little bit of red out there. February 14th, 2023, and here in Palm Desert. Let me make these introductory remarks first. I'd like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted as permitted under AB 361 and Board Resolution 2022-10. Today's meeting is presented in a hybrid format, in person at CVW's Steve Robbins Administration Building and via Zoom. Members of the public may participate in person or via Zoom. Zoom details are listed on the meeting agenda. The meeting is streamed live on the district's website and YouTube channel. Members of the public who wish to comment on any item on the agenda or within the jurisdiction of the district will have 3 minutes. Public comment may be provided in person, via Zoom, or by emailing the clerk of the board. Such comments will become part of the board meeting record. And then we have all of our directors here, so we will be able to just talk to each other in person and vote normally. Yeah, it is nice. Okay, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And roll call, please.
Good morning, President Powell.
Here.
Vice President Estrada.
Here.
Director Bianco.
Here.
Director Aguilar.
Here.
And Director Nelson.
Here.
Thank you.
Yay. So we have, let's see, do we have any adjustments or deletions or additions today?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
No, me either. Is there anybody from the from the public wishing to comment at this time? If you're on and you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. Nobody's on there.
Nobody in the room.
Seeing none, we'll continue on. We have one anniversary, Susana Davila, Customer Service Representative 3 with 20 years. Congratulations. And she's not attending today, but we do have a little certificate there. Consent calendar consists of items 6A through H. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
With the motion a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passed 5-0. Okay, and it takes us to action items. This first one, 8A, I requested that this be put on the agenda, and I'm happy to talk about it. I had a potential conflict that appears to have been resolved, so I don't necessarily need to pursue that change, but I'm certainly happy to discuss it if somebody else. We're meeting. I guess we have an ordinance in place that says we meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 8 a.m.
Yes, it's a combination between an ordinance and resolutions that have updated the rules of the board over the years.
Right. And like I said, I'm curious if there's. I actually like the 8 a.m.s, and I think I've heard that from a couple other people.
Yep.
We were just chatting. The weird thing about it is that this board used to meet at 10 a.m. and then it got changed to 9 a.m. and then we changed it to 8 a.m. because we needed more time because it felt like noon was kind of a hard break. And we don't run over the noon very often anymore, but the 8 a.m. seems to work. So we can just table that item if there's no desire to discuss it.
Okay.
Yeah. 8B, this is the revised bid opening procedures. I saw that there was some modification to that compared to the last time it was brought before us.
Yes.
I'll move approval there.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passed 5-0. Environmental Services, we have the CEQA review for the Mid-Canal Storage Project. Pull that up. Who's presenting that? Mr. Bigley.
William?
You're the man. I don't know, David.
Oh, and Mr. Wilson.
It was almost a race to the table there after quite a pause.
All right.
Good morning.
This is a project that we will have to install storage along the mid-canal, Coachella Canal. And we've completed an environmental document. We have a presentation that's prepared. Dave can give a little more detail on the capital side of the project.
Morning.
Yeah, morning, David.
Yeah, this is the Mid-Canal Storage Project. I believe you're familiar with it. This is intended to provide additional storage along the Mid-Canal to help with the operations for the canal itself. We can go through the presentation. We do have our environmental specialist on the line, I believe, who can perform a presentation, but we have a mitigated negative declaration here that has gone through the 30-day public review. We had a couple of minor comments that we responded to, and we can go into the presentation if you like.
So not controversial.
No.
Yeah, and if I may, I'm sorry, because it's just a CEQA document where the board is making certain findings, some level of a presentation of the environmental document would be recommended.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Jeff, are you on the line?
He is on the line. He's been promoted to a panelist. So Jeff, could we just have you unmute yourself, and then we'll go ahead and put you up on the screen for your presentation.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning. Can you hear me? So I'm Jeff Harvey. I'm the principal and senior scientist at Harvey Consulting Group, and we were asked to assist in preparation of the California Environmental Quality Act review for it. It was determined early on that a initial study and mitigated negative declaration was sufficient to satisfy the requirements. I'll now present what we did in performing that study. Next slide, please. So the agenda is fairly straightforward. To introduce the project team, do the project description and objectives of the project, the environmental analysis, and findings of that, and discuss very briefly the comments on the draft document and how those to in the final document that's before you today. Next slide, please. The team, of course, consisted of your environmental team, Mr. Bigley, William Patterson, Carlos Huerta, Lon Watts also participated, and of course, David Wilson, our engineer, provided a bit of technical advice and information. I'm actually a sub-consultant to Dahl Consultants, which is the engineering team, and led the CEQA review with my team, which includes the RCH group for air quality and greenhouse gases, and Helix Environmental for biological and cultural sources. Landmark, under a separate contract, with Dahl performed the geotechnical assessment that was also used in the report. Next, please. The project objectives are to develop water storage capacity, improving canal management. In this case, the capacity would be a maximum of 728 acre feet, and would also help compensate for the loss of storage capacity that occurred when the Coachella Canal lining project was built, replacing the original earthen canal. It has an additional benefit of resolving ongoing canal lining maintenance that is from the high clay soils in this stretch of the canal that shrink and swell and cause the overlying concrete lining to break, and therefore to need to be replaced and maintained on a regular basis. And my understanding is that that's been a very expensive prospect, and that replacing the concrete lining with a clay liner solves that problem and will relieve you of having that cost of ongoing maintenance. An additional feature of the project is to extend IID electrical power to the existing remote operation system, heating system at the Siphon 14 gate. That allows you to regulate the water levels in the reservoir, in the upstream reaches of the canal. And it replaces an existing solar panel system that has apparently been subject to recurring vandalism. Next slide, please. So here's the project location map. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Dylan being due south of the southern beginning where Siphon 11 is, and then extending up to Siphon 14 due east of Worcester, 4.9 miles in total. And the siphons themselves will stay completely intact. It's only the canal prisms that are being modified. And the last feature, just to point out here briefly, right there at Siphon 13, you can see Old Nyland Road. It's also called English Road, and it is just below the bend in the road there is where the electrical circuit starts, extends north on English Road up to the Coachella Canal Road up to Siphon 14. And that electrical circuit is a distance of about 3.1 miles. Next slide, please. Just in summary, all of the earthwork to remove, the idea of the project is to remove the berm that separates the original earthen canal and the newer concrete line canal and spread that material out to create the clay liner. Very high clay content in that section, at least as we noted, and that has been causing the problems with the concrete liner, but very useful then to use for this clay lining replacement, which gives you the same seepage control, equivalent seepage control as you had with the concrete liner when it was not cracked. So you'll end up with a linear reservoir that is 3 cells. Between Siphons 11 and 12 is cell 1, 12 and 13 is cell 2, and 12 to 14 is the third cell. Another feature of the project is to increase the height of the concrete collars at the siphons, and that's because now with the reservoir, of course, you will be able to regulate water higher and lower within the whole of the channel that will be joined to account for your full reservoir capacity. Next, please. Installation of rock armoring on the eastern bank, which is to prevent erosion from westerly winds in this area, so the wind blows across from west to east, and on the east bank, therefore, that we need to have erosion control in place. I mentioned already the 12 kilovolt electrical circuit extending to Siphon 14. And then the east side wildlife breakers. There are wildlife breakers up and down either side of the canal that were installed as part of the canal lining project. On the east side, they are inside of the old earthen canal and therefore need to be replaced. And they will be replaced in place. So at the exact same locations they are now, we'll have ramps extending down the east bank of the new reservoir and into the body of water of the reservoir to access water. But there will be safety fencing that will prevent animals from potentially getting into the reservoir itself and getting caught in the reservoir. They'll have access to be able to drink water, but not to be captured in the water. Last feature is that all the earthwork is balanced on site. We're not importing any material except for the rock that will be used for the bank armoring, and that comes from a very nearby commercial source, about 4.5 miles to the north. Next slide. So here are just the schematics here to show you the existing configuration with the dry canal, the old canal on the east side, and the new line canal on the west side, on the left of this picture, and the berm in the middle. Next slide. You can see that berm gets removed and creates the clay liner on the west bank. Next slide. And at low flow in the canal, when during your winter low demand period, we'll use sheet pile lining to separate the water so that water continues to flow. But before the final configuration of the earthwork to spread the clay lining on either side, then the final berm in the middle will be removed and placed across the center of the bottom of the new reservoir, the new wider canal prism. Next, please. And here then is the final project with the cross-section of the reservoir shown, the existing east bank of the earthen canal, the existing west bank of the concrete line canal. The concrete lining will be buried by the clay liner. It will not be removed, buried in place under an average of 2.8 feet of clay for the clay lining. And before I go any further, David, I may not have done this justice as your engineering perspective would make it. Anything you would add here?
Nothing except to say that the work for the diversion of the canal would be performed during the low demand period in the fall. So the intention for this project would be to perform a bulk of the earthwork in the summertime to take advantage of the heat so that the moisture content within the old canal can dry up. So you're working a little bit in the dry, and then in the fall, pick it back up, and then work on the diversion when the demand is low. So the intention here is to perform this work without any impact or minimal impact to operations. Go ahead, Jeff.
Very good, thank you. The next slide, please. So here's what the final product looks like. Worcester, you can see there the agricultural land and some of the wildlife refuge along the shoreline of the Salton Sea. And then here's the canal segments with the siphons labeled so that you can see the new wider channel that will be the inline storage reservoir between check 11 or siphon 11 and ending at siphon 14. Next slide, please. So before I go on, are there any questions from the board or anybody else about the project description itself?
Thanks.
I have a
Very
question.
good.
Sorry, I have a question. So on one of the exhibits, I'm not sure if this was attached or if I got this from somewhere else. It shows that the majority of the cracks are between siphon 11 and 14, but there are cracks in other areas that are going to be affected by this project, correct? Just not as significant as these, more than a quarter inch. Is that correct?
There are other cracks throughout the canal that will not benefit per se from this particular project. This is where the bulk of the repairs have been taking place, where the clays are, where the expansive soils tend to trigger a bulk of that cracking.
Okay, thanks.
And maybe just to be clear, there will be no, the area that we've defined here, potential effects between siphon 11 and siphon 14. All of that work will be done within the fence line of the the earthen canal and the line canal, all part of the Bureau of Reclamation federal right-of-way. So the project is subject to requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, and because the Bureau of Reclamation owns the canal and also has to grant approval, it is also subject to requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act. The just to advise you, Reclamation is preparing its own environmental assessment. They are very close to their public review draft, and that will support their eventual finding of no significant impacts. The two documents have been very closely defined and prepared in tandem so that there was no conflicting content, either in analyses or in recommendations for mitigation measures. Next. The CEQA document was prepared based upon review of the CEQA guideline, 2022 CEQA guidelines, Appendix G, and the entire list of the checklist items. I won't go through all of those. I think you're probably familiar with this, but the whole gamut of environmental topics as prescribed by CEQA. In addition, AB 52, state law AB 52 requires that the district consult with tribes over potential concerns they may have over tribal cultural sources, and that consultation was also conducted concurrent with this environmental review. Next. NEPA topics are very much the same in terms of the resource areas that are covered, but NEPA also requires at this level of analysis some discussion of alternatives, and they also have to do their own independent consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office and the local tribes. Next. For the project, particular concern was related to biological resources and cultural resources, and of course to geotechnical. Geotechnical was done as part of engineering to determine the adequacy of the clay materials and the extent of them, and then what depth of clay liner you would need to get the same temperature control that you have with the existing concrete liner. And we utilized that geotechnical assessment, but we did not conduct those surveys. Biological surveys and cultural and tribal cultural resources surveys were specifically conducted by our team to support this CEQA document. Our final determination is that all significant impacts that are identified in the initial study can be mitigated to a less than significant level with implementation of the recommended mitigation measures, and those are contained in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program as required by CEQA at the end of the document that you have, I believe, to consider for adoption here. Next. Mitigation measures include for air quality, just routine dust control, equipment maintenance, for emissions control, and state limitations on how long vehicles can be left idling in between being engaged in actual work, in this case mostly earthwork. We're also required to conduct pre-construction surveys for nesting birds and to train all of the workers for what are the environmental sensitivities and what to do in the event that they do encounter, for example, a desert tortoise or a nesting bird. Neither one of those is expected, but the training ensures that the workers know how to react. It also teaches them some simple things about trash control, to stop attraction of ravens, for example, and crows, and checking under vehicles before they move vehicles to make sure that no animal has gotten under the vehicle. Simple things like that. Same thing for cultural resources, the Worker Environmental Awareness Training Program for any encounter of archaeological resources or human remains. Again, both of these are considered to be very low likelihood, but training in the event that it should happen. Some of the excavation for the canal is below the areas that have been excavated historically for either the original Orphan Canal or the Lion Canal, and so those are areas that could potentially contain resources that have not been previously identified. For water quality protection and hazardous materials control, the state does require a general construction permit and a stormwater pollution prevention plan. That mitigation measure is presented in the hazard section, but applies equally to the water quality and hydrology section. And then the measures for tribal cultural resources are the same as were identified for cultural resources in the identification of potential artifacts or human remains, and how those are to be treated, and whether there are tribal associations that need to be identified. Next. So I think we've already gone through most of this pretty well. If you want me to go into detail on each one of the measures, I can. There is a construction permit required from the local air pollution control district, in this case Imperial County, as the entire length of this part of the canal is within Imperial, if not in Riverside County. Next.
We don't need it.
Biological resources, we have talked about the measures. And stop me if you have any questions, otherwise let's go on to cultural resources. Same thing, the training to be conducted and actions to be taken in the event that there is something discovered during the earthwork. Next. The requirements of the construction bill permit and pollution prevention plan. These will be things that the construction contractor will obtain this permit and obtain with the report tracking number from the state. AB 52 consultation was conducted. Only that was done by sending out letters in May 2022 The Agua Caliente band replied. They're the only tribe that did reply, and the district engaged in formal consultation with them. And at the end of that, the consultation was concluded in December with the tribe sending a letter. No, it was January. I apologize. In January of this year, saying that they had reviewed the cultural report, they had reviewed the initial study, and the mitigation measures for cultural and tribal cultural sources and found those adequate, and they considered that consultation was closed. I mentioned earlier that the Bureau will conduct its own consultation, and that will include with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and with ample cultural sources. That is upcoming. There were, let me just add though, that in the biological surveys and as presented in your report and in the pending federal environmental assessment, no listed species were identified, or no habitat for those species was identified for their likely presence. So we don't expect to have any endangered species issues, and we expect that, as they did for the canal lining project, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will concur with that conclusion. We will not need to engage in formal consultation. Next. When I say we, I meant the Bureau of Reclamation in that case. We did go through your internal review process with the EAC, and they approved the release of the public draft in December, just before Christmas. We published the notice of availability and the notice of completion as required. That triggered a 30-day public review period that ended on January 23rd. The draft document was available to all stakeholder groups, including tribal government, state resource agencies. It was also sent directly to the Imperial County Clerk and the state clearinghouse. Next. At the end of that comment period, we received letters from Department of Fish and Wildlife Service, Caltrans, Imperial Irrigation District, and one that I'm missing here. We'll come to that. It's later in the document. All of those comments have been reviewed and replied to in what is now Chapter 6 of the initial study that you have, and the original letters were added as Appendix G in this final initial study. Next. Cal Fish and Wildlife Service had some misunderstanding about the project. Their letter asserts that we failed to disclose in the project description certain elements, and therefore the document was inadequate. What we had failed to disclose thereby was artificial nighttime lighting. In fact, as we replied to them and explained, there is no artificial nighttime lighting proposed, and no nighttime lighting that would be done for construction of the project, so that is not a deficiency in the project description. It's simply that that's not part of the project description. They also implied that we had not disclosed impacts to streams that cross the canal. The siphons, as you probably are all aware, the siphon, the check lead to the siphons that extend underneath and below those stream systems, those desert dry washes. And none of those siphons themselves are going to be affected in any way by this project. All of the project is within the above ground features of the canal system, the existing earthen and newer line segment of the canal, and nothing to do with the siphons being affected. The project's designed very specifically to avoid any encroachment on those desert dry washes, and we explained that in the response as well. The department also made the claim that the canal, the entire canal, is a natural stream and subject to their jurisdiction. And we reminded them in the reply that the canal is a federal facility, is entirely human-made and not a natural stream by any state definition. It's operated and maintained as a water supply system, and that it is not subject to their jurisdiction. We do recognize, and we did get permits for the siphons when they were constructed as part of the canal line project, which did have to encroach on those desert dry wash channels. In this case, we don't have any part of the project that extends into those channels. They also raised concerns about burrowing owls We don't expect burrowing owls in this area. There are nearby agricultural lands, as you saw in the aerial photo in the project description. That is preferred habitat for owls, and they are known to occur there. Because they occur there, and that's only a few miles from the canal, CDFW raised the concern, and of course we recognize birds fly. They could come in. There were no indications of any burrowing owls or burrows anywhere along the canal segments when we did the biological survey, and the biologists concluded that it was a very low likelihood and very low value habitat for burrowing owls. Nonetheless, in response to their comment, we did add surveys for burrowing owls to the nesting bird survey, pre-construction survey mitigation measures. They also noted that there are CDFW fees to be paid. Those will, of course, be paid when we file the notice of determination, assuming you decide to approve today. And then environmental data will be filed regarding the surveys and their conclusions regarding endangered species. Next.
If I may, just real quickly too, the assertion that the canal is a natural stream and subject to the Fish and Game Code Section 1600 and therefore permitting through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Staff didn't support that assertion, but we also engaged the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to be sure that they agreed with our assessment of that, and they did. So I just thought I would put that out there.
Good, thank you. Trans noted that there are requirements for oversized vehicles being transported to and from the sites on state highways, and that if such vehicles were going to be used, then we needed to have a permit for those oversized vehicles. They also said that if we were going to do anything that would impair traffic on any state highways, including road closures or detours or any kind of traffic delay, that we would need to file a traffic control plan for their review and approval. In this case, where all of the work, as I indicated, is going to be conducted within the existing fence line of the federal right-of-way that contains the two canal channels, and we have no potential for road closure or detours, therefore no traffic control plan is required. There may be oversized vehicles used by the contractor, and of course the contractor will be required to consult with Caltrans and obtain the permit for those vehicles. Imperial Irrigation District provided a number of details about the electrical circuit that we had not had when we published the document, and we added those to the project description. We also reviewed those details to determine that they did not raise any new issues outside of what had been analyzed as environmental concerns for this project. We knew the alignment from along this road up to Coachella Canal Road and up to the Siphon 14, that the actual details of the wiring and the poles themselves is what were added to the document now. And there were no changes to the assessment of impacts or to requirements for any new mitigation measures. Next. For the final initial study, we have the draft initial study with all the revisions needed to comprise the final, and they're shown in track changes, so that anywhere that we revise text to delete something that's shown in strikeout, we'll add text that we added in. For example, as I just indicated for the electrical circuit, are shown in are underlined so that it's clear what was added and or modified as we transition from the draft to the final. We added the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which includes every one of the mitigation measures identified. It includes who's responsible for implementing them, the timing of when they are to be implemented, and how they are to be verified that they have been completed. As I indicated, we added Chapter 6 with all of the comments and the district's responses, and Appendix G with the original comment letters. We did, as required, send the responses to comments to the individual agencies 10 days ago prior to this board meeting for their review, and that gives them an opportunity, if they choose to reply to our response to the comment. We did not receive any additional replies from the agencies that I'm aware of. And I'm sure I would have been told, somebody in the room there will verify that that is the case. Also before you is the notice of determination that has to be filed with the, after the board's approval, that gets filed with both the Imperial County Clerk and the State Clearinghouse, and noting that the board has considered the project, has made its determination, and approved the project. Next. So today's request is that the board adopt the final initial study, mitigated negative declaration, and the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan as completing all the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act for the project, and then approve the project and file the notice of determination.
Yeah, I think we've already approved the project, haven't we? The staff recommendation in the agenda does not include that second bullet of approving the project.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's already happened, eh?
Right.
Yeah.
We also have a bullet on here that says authorize staff to solicit bids for construction. Typically, we don't combine that with an environmental document when we bring it to board.
Yeah, no, so what we're being asked to do is certify the IS and the negative declaration, adopt the MMRP, and provide authorization to file a notice of determination to complete secret review. That's what we're going to do.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Any questions from the board?
There's one more piece
Okay.
to that as well. We received a late comment letter that didn't make it in the slides. We went ahead and addressed that in the document as well. That was from the Division of Dam Safety, asserting that the project is subject to their jurisdiction. However, that was reviewed again by engineering and determined that it was not a dam, not subject to an application review.
Is that a California agency or?
It is.
It is.
Yeah, the letter they sent us
nothing
was
better to
dated in the middle of January. However, we didn't receive until after the public review comment period closed,
Okay,
and so it was a delayed response.
thank you. Any comments, questions from the board? Is there a motion to approve the recommended action as listed on the agenda?
Make a motion.
So motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passed 5-0.
Thank you.
And then we're going to take D now also, which is the loan repayment agreement.
Morning, Gary.
Okay, so this is also related to Mid-Canal Storage Project. This is for the 3 funding agreements associated with this project. So we received a $7.5 million loan from the United States Bureau of Reclamation as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Program. So the first funding agreement that's addressed in this BAI is a loan repayment agreement between CBWD and the USBR. The loan is for 30 years with a 1.875% interest rate. And then the second funding agreement is with San Diego County Water Authority as they're participating in the funding for this project. They're paying up to $4.575 million, basically 61% of the project. So they are also going to be participating with CBWD to repay the loan from the Bureau. And then the third funding agreement is with the San Luis River Indian Water Authority. They're also paying a portion of this project. They're paying up to $975,000, which is about 13% of the project. They are going to provide their share in 3 lump sum payments over the course of construction. So they're not going to be participating in the 30-year loan repayment process with us. But we'll apply their funding upfront to lower the amount of the loan that we have to pay over the 30 years. Let's see. The San Luis Rey, their board of directors have approved the funding agreement. They took it to their board a few months ago, and they will sign once this funding agreement is approved by us. And San Diego County Water Authority, they will be taking their agreement to their board in March 23rd. And we've worked out the loan repayment agreement with the USBR as well, so we'll just be processing that for signature. With that, are there any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, and you might not be able to answer this, but I'll ask it and somebody can come up. But USPR is coming out in March to do some kind of signing, and is this part, are these loans part of that package that they're coming out for?
My understanding is that it's not for this specific project, but it's for the $60 million loan that we got from them for the irrigation lateral and the box dam
Okay.
replacements.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay,
I was just trying to sort that out. So.
yeah.
And then, Jeff, I have one more question. What's the, this is near some property that the company I work for owns. What's the distance that I have to be away to prevent a conflict?
In general, is 500 feet, but it's no longer just the distance, it's whether or not, in fact, you have a financial interest, or if anything you're doing on this board will impact that financial interest.
Yeah, I don't think it will, so I'm going to go with it.
But thanks for checking.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make a
agreements?
motion to approve the item.
Second?
Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passed 5-0. Okay, so we're going to take an item out of order just because Don Burnett has plans to go do the similar presentation at Desert Water Agency this morning. So we will move forward, and then after the presentation, we'll go back and do 8E. So right now on to 9B1, which is the Colorado River Salinity Control Program presentation. And I'm sure you'll be more brief than our previous presentation, which you came in on. Seemed to go on forever.
Good morning, President Powell. I guess before Don gets started with his program, I'd just like to introduce him briefly. Don is the Executive Director of the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Forum. Their group is, kind of coordinates all the activities between the 7 states and I think our federal partners on salinity measures, control measures, and Don can go over that. But anyways, he and his group were down here in the Valley last week. We hosted one of their work group meetings. I think we had a chance to tour him around our facilities as well as the Salton Sea. So he was good enough to kind of give us a brief update on the program. So
great. Welcome.
Take it away, Don.
Great.
Yeah.
Welcome, Don.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate being here. And, I sometimes refer to the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Program as the greatest water quality effort in the history of man. I don't know if that's defensible, but thus far, nobody's challenged me on that statement.
Could be.
I'll kind of talk to you about maybe 50 years worth of work very quickly to run through and kind of teach you about the program. The big take home is we're all about improving water quality to folks in the lower basin and improving the water for irrigation and making it available. And the take home is that you need to know that the water that you're receiving is more than 100 milligrams per liter better than it would have been but for the program. Big highlights, first of all, from a geologic perspective, you need to understand there's an infinite amount of salt in the upper basin that's going to come downstream. And our goal is to keep it in the upper basin. We're doing this to comply with water quality standards. Our goal, again, is to try and keep it in place. We've got a number of sources of funding, which I'll describe, and it's always a challenge to keep the funding moving, to keep the program going. The program has somewhat transitioned over the years from EPA mandating to our drive is really to decrease damages to the downstream water users. And then we've got various needs within the program. And so I'll kind of jump through it. I'm a geologist, so I could spend hours talking about geology, but I won't. You just need to know that two tectonic events, one that happened 300 million years ago and one that happened 100 million years ago, and in fact they had to do with California being added physically to the Union, created a down warping of the interior continent and the transgression of a sea into the area. And with that transgression into the sea was deposited a formation which we refer to as the Mancos Shell, and it's thousands of feet thick. And it's pervasive through the upper basin. It's highly erodible, so it forms the valleys where the cities and farms are, and it's loaded up with salt. So when water comes in contact with it, either through man's activities or through natural processes, the salt dissolves, comes into the Colorado River and its tributaries and comes downstream. That's why the water starts at 50 milligrams per liter, and as it leaves the United States, it's in the 800 milligram per liter range. So just remember, there's plenty of salt upstream. To understand kind of the history of the genesis of the program, in the early 1970s, salinity levels were going up dramatically. And in fact, the water supply that you receive here in the Coachella Valley had increased in TDS by more than 200 milligrams per liter in the 20 years immediately preceding the 1970s. So there was great concern by U.S. users that this important water supply would no longer be usable. And then there were significant concerns with Mexico and the United States, and a lot of discussions going on. Of course, you diverted Imperial Dam, just downstream's Morales Dam. We, the United States, were dumping an awful lot of really cruddy water into the river immediately below Imperial Dam and above Morales Dam so that we were meeting our water quantity commitment to Mexico. But we were in the efforts then giving really cruddy water to Mexico. And so Mexico was understandably very concerned about what was occurring. And so there were discussions with the State Department. And then in 1972, Congress passed the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, which is the predecessor of the Clean Water Act. And not to say anything bad about EPA, but they really became the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And were very aggressive with the states, mandating and dictating things to the states. And so the states came together. They created the 7-state salinity control forum. That's the organization I work for. The governors from each state appoint 3 individuals to represent the state on the forum. In 1974, we went back for passage of the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Act. It has 2 titles. Title I of the act is how do we meet our water quality commitment to Mexico? It has to do with the Yuma desalting plant and other features. Title II is how do we improve the water quality of the U.S. users? And that's the part that I deal with in the program. Literally within a day or two after the passage of the act, EPA then issued this mandate that the states adopt water quality standards, which the states did the next year. Those water quality standards then had 2 parts, a numeric criteria, which is a thou shalt not exceed kind of a number, as well as a plan of implementation. And the numeric criteria established by the states was what were the 1972 levels. And so it was really an anti-degradation kind of a standard. We're not going to let the river get any worse than it is now. And so then they started to move ahead on a plan of implementation and how to work on it. To understand how we implement salinity control, the bread and butter then is to say, we need to stop water from coming in contact with saline soils. And so through the upper basin, of course, we've got all these ancient ditches and irrigation systems. And so the goal was to create a Bureau of Reclamation program that would stop the leaky canals and ditches and laterals so that water wouldn't go out the bottom and dissolve salts and come back into the river, and to improve the irrigation efficiencies so that less water is applied to the land so there's not excess water to dissolve salts and come back into the river. That's the bread and butter of the salinity control program. And so what we have is what we call the basin-wide program, where the Bureau of Reclamation goes out and meets with canals and tries to pipe them and line them. And then NRCS follows up with, under the EQIP program, and comes and meets with farmers and tries to improve their irrigation efficiency. That's the bread and butter of the program. There's also a smaller piece, and that is that BLM is working to reduce the erosion on the vast federally administered lands in the Upper Basin. Also, we have point source control, where the states administer MPDS permits and limit the amount of discharge. And then we also have one presently point source from a saline spring area that I'll talk to you about, called the Paradox Valley Unit. So let me just jump to the Paradox Valley Unit and talk about that. I'm sure you've heard about it. This is the Paradox Valley. 300 million years ago, like the one graphic I showed you, there was an intrusion of salt into the western United States. Huge deposits of evaporites into these basins, and then they got buried. Well, salt is less dense than the overlying rock, and so it wants to buoyantly float up. And also, when you put pressure on it from overlying rock, then it squirts up and squeezes up. And so actually, the salt that was buried deep in the earth squeezed up into the area, created a dome, created an anticline with salt underneath. And then as water came down through that rock and dissolved the salt underneath, then the overlying rock collapsed and created a valley. And there's 11 other valleys just like this in the Four Corners area. Underneath this valley, there's 10,000 feet of salt still remaining. And so when water then falls in the form of snow or rain onto the La Salle Mountains, it then comes down through the groundwater system, comes in contact with that dome of salt underneath there, dissolves the salt, and then moves down and discharges 250,000 milligram per liter brine into the Dolores River. Wow. And so the project then is to put in shallow wells, capture the brine before it discharges to the river, and then shove it 16,000 feet into the earth into an injection well. And that project's been in place for 27 years now, and it's worked fairly well, except that as we're pushing it into the earth under high pressures, we're inducing earthquakes, thousands of them. And several of them have been more than 4 in magnitude. And in March of 2019, we had a 4.5 earthquake, and they shut down the project for a couple of years. And so that's obviously of great concern. They've mapped it out. They've studied the earthquakes. They've studied the faults. We knew this day was coming, and so we've been pushing reclamation for about 15 years to do an EIS to find a different injection or brine disposal alternative. So they entered into the EIS. One was to drill a new well further away into a larger fault block. Another one was to build evaporation ponds, which was the original plan of reclamation in the 1970s until EPA came in and expressed concerns about migratory birds. We also looked at zero liquid discharge technology. In fact, we had an outfit from Canada there for a month, where we had about 30 gallons per minute of 250,000 milligram per liter water coming in one end, and out the other end came 500 milligram per liter water and solid salt. But it's expensive, particularly the O&M costs. And then also in the EIS, they looked at the do-nothing alternative, okay, the no-action plan. Well, ultimately, about 2 years ago, they came out with the final EIS. It's a very large document, 5 volumes, appendices, more than 2,500 pages, and they recommended no action, which is we continue to operate the project, limp along until it dies, and then we're done, and then that salt begins to come back down the Colorado River. States did not accept that. We went to Interior, we put pressure on them, and they said, all right, we won't issue a record of decision, and we've now asked them to relook at some of the questions or some of the assumptions that they made in the EIS process. So that's the status. Today, we are back on. We're only functioning at about 65% of where we were pre-earthquake, which is a little less than half of the total salt that's discharging to the river. You can see that black ooze coming into the river in the top right-hand side. When the river flows are down, then the Dolores River is literally just black with this brine as it comes in, and then when we get high flows, then it washes out and comes on downstream. So that's the status of the Paradox Valley unit. Shift gears, funding is a fairly complicated thing. We take and we cobble together an awful lot of funding sources to try and make the program work. But principally, we're trying to fund the Bureau of Reclamation program, which is, again, the lining and piping of the canals. Our ask is 10.7. The president's budget this year is 6 million. Reclamation says that they believe they'll be able to find another 4 million, but that's a little tenuous right now. On the on-farm piece, the EQIP piece, we've generally been fairly successful in receiving the funding requests as we have on the BLM piece. And you can kind of see the history of the basin-wide program. You know, our funding has dipped in recent years. And so we're struggling to work with our testimony to Congress to try and increase that, whereas on the EQIP side, we're able to generally receive whatever we ask for, whatever we're able to implement. So that's the funding. But you need to know that, like many Bureau of Reclamation projects, there's a cost share from the states. And so historically, that cost share was Reclamation would receive funding from Congress, build a project, and then the states would repay to the Treasury over time 30% of the cost. Well, in 1996, then there were changes made, and so instead of repaying the Treasury with time, it went to upfront cost share, which means then that they take the dollars from the basin states up front instead of something that we owe over time, which then put a greater demand on our money. And so as we look at it, you know, this is just an example. If we receive $6 million in the basin-wide program, then the required, and $13 million in the EQIP program in a given year, then you see the cost share amounts that are required by the states. Well, where do those cost share, well, let me back up. Bureau of Reclamation just takes the cost share dollars and the appropriated dollars, blends them together and spends them. But on the EQIP side, NRCS doesn't have legal authority to expend our cost share dollars, and so they go into something called the Basin States Program, where we do salinity control with those dollars. We take those total dollars and we say, where do those dollars come from? And they come from the Upper Basin Fund and the Lower Basin Fund. And so there are then formulas set out by Congress as to where those dollars come from, the percentages. And so if we focus in then on the cost share dollars, which is really the area of our greatest concern and which I want to bring to your attention, if, for example, by the time we pay O&M dollars and cost share in the various programs, you know, we've got about $12 million in obligations. Well, Congress then says that the Secretary will set the split between how much comes from the Upper Basin Fund and the Lower Basin Fund every year based on certain criteria. But the amount from the Upper Basin Fund pursuant to law cannot be more than 15%. So we've always set the maximum of 15% in the Upper Basin Fund. Then the remainder then comes from the Lower Basin Fund. The Upper Basin Fund is just put into the rate structure as they sell power in the Upper Basin. They just adjust it to meet whatever the salinity control program needs are. That's not the case in the Lower Basin Fund. The Lower Basin Fund is a specific mill levy that they collect from power users in California and in Nevada. You notice Arizona's not on there. In the legislation, Arizona's paying 4.5 mills, but it goes to CAP repayment until 2044 when it's paid off, and then their dollars will begin to kick in to the salinity control program. And so right now it's being borne by just California and Nevada power users as to meet then that 85% remaining amount. Historically, we had an awful lot of money in that Lower Basin Fund for salinity. But because, one, we changed to upfront cost share, two, because we've got now declining power revenues because of lower flows of the river, and three, because we've had increased funding under the EQIP program, that surplus is gone, and we're now in deficit. So what do we do when we're in deficit? You know, if we don't have sufficient dollars? Well, in the Upper Basin Fund, we simply adjust the power rates, and then we get more dollars. And of course, unless we get to Deadpool, and then the world falls apart. But in the Lower Basin Fund, the repayment piece, we can delay, but then pay with interest. But the upfront cost share, there's no provision. So what have we been doing for the last 5 or 6 years that we've been in deficit? We've been delaying implementation. So we might be required under the law to do $8 million worth of cost share work, but we only have $7 million. So we only do $7 million worth of work this year. That means we owe $1 million. And now we're up to $13 million in arrears. And the Bureau of Reclamation is getting pretty anxious, as are the states. We've created a funding committee. We've analyzed a whole lot of options that we're looking at on the cost share. One area that I'd bring to your attention is we are looking at where could additional funds come from. And included in those discussions is, could water users, the beneficiaries, help put dollars into the cost share to help fund the salinity control program and meet our cost share obligations. We're also looking at reducing our cost share obligations. So I give you that. Let me just tell you quickly where we are as far as status. Every 3 years, we have to redo an evaluation of the standards and submit it to EPA. The last review was in 2023. We're now in 2020, we're now looking at the 2023 review, but we chart out and we say, what does your water quality look like? What would have it looked like had there not been the salinity control program? What is the program over the next several years? As Robert indicated, we were down here meeting in your offices last week. Our primary focus of that meeting was to redo this document, to redo the review. This is very preliminary and draft information, but you can see on here that currently, you're receiving water at maybe 675 milligrams per liter. If we're able to get the funding that we've been able to get in recent years, then by 2040, it's projected that your salinity levels will go up to 730. If we're not able to get that funding, then it's projected they'll go up to 770 milligrams per liter. So we're concerned about continuing and sustaining funding within the program. We have a model that the Bureau of Reclamation operates that looks at all the water uses in the lower basin and analyzes what are the damages associated with the increased salinity. Crops produce less. Your water heater goes out early. Your industrial uses, have additional expenses. And they bring them all together, and when we look at it, we find that we have reduced damages each year to lower basin users by about $300 million. But there's still $350 million, and if we were to cease the program, then they'd climb to more than $600 million. So these are the things that drive us as we look at the salinity control program, is how do we reduce the damages? And we know that we haven't quantified all the damages. And so as we're trying to maintain funding for the program, looking to folks like you to help us understand what are the damages to increase salinity levels. Your leaching fraction goes up, and so it requires you to use more water, or you're not able to reuse water as much or as well because of increased salinity levels in the source water. So those are things that we'd be looking for help from organizations such as you. It is amazing to me that we do have a program and a system that for almost 50 years has worked extremely well, where we go upriver 600, 700, 800 miles and we change irrigation practices so that when we come downriver, there's better water quality for the downstream users. And it has been very successful, but we do have needs, and those needs would include things such as political support as we seek funding. We seek for testimony for Congress. We may need to change the legislation as to the cost share rate so that we can keep the program going. We hopefully soon will identify an additional alternative at Paradox and then be coming to you for political support for a Paradox replacement alternative. We need to figure out a way to increase the income into the lower basin fund so that we comply with the Salinity Control Act. And we need help identifying the benefits. And in particular, my drive is not just what are the dollar benefits to you, but what are the water benefits? Because as you well know, in this day and age, it's not just, the damages to the downstream users are $350 million, but wait a minute, by improving the water quality, if we save you 200,000 acre feet of water, then that speaks even more than the dollars. So that's the story of the Salinity Control Program. And if you have any questions for me or.
Yeah, Don, that was an excellent presentation. And we're not just taking water at Imperial Dam, we're also taking it at Parker with the Met Exchange program. So we get your salt twice.
That's right.
It's your salt, though.
Yes. And I'm trying to keep as much as I can.
I do have a question. Can you explain the split, the 15%, 85%, and how they arrived at that?
So that was set by Congress back in 1974. And at that point in time, it was clearly the lower basin users that were driving the salinity control program, saying, hey, we're getting poor quality water. And so it was just perceived that the benefits in the lower basin were at least 85%. And so that was the split set by Congress. It is in law, but as part of the program funding committee that we're looking at adjusting that, because I think upper basin users are saying, wait a minute, we're getting an awful lot of benefits in the form of improved agricultural efficiency. And so, we're talking about potentially adjusting that split to 25-75. That would reduce the pressure on the lower basin fund to a certain amount. So that is on the table in the discussions between the states.
Okay, thank you.
What kind of dollars are we talking about for water users?
I mean, in total, if we're looking to make some adjustments maybe in this current farm bill about our cost share requirements. If we get those through, if we simply had a total of $1 million from all water users in the lower basin fund, that would take us from negative to positive. We're also looking at trying to get Arizona brought into the fold a little bit earlier than 2044, and that would bring several million. But it's kind of in that range, somewhere between 1 million and 3 million, depending on how quickly we're trying to dissolve the debt that we have.
That's about, on 7.5 million acre feet of deliveries to the lower basin, that's about 13 cents per acre foot. Yeah.
Hey, I'm glad Peter's doing the math for me. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's important work. I mean, it's really tragic that you had to stop, for those years at Paradox. And have you had more earthquakes since then?
Yes, hundreds of them.
They're always happening.
But nothing
not
much
big.
big. Yeah, not bigger than 2.5.
Yeah.
And our current agreement with Reclamation is that they're going to continue to operate Paradox at 65% in 6-month tests. So we'll do it for 6 months. If we haven't had another big earthquake, we'll do it for another 6 months. We had reached the point where we were injecting at about just a little below 5,000 PSI uphole pressure, which created about 12,000 PSI downhole pressure. And the injection of water doesn't in and of itself create an earthquake, but what it does is increases the pore water pressure in all the fractures down there. So there's rock already and earth tensions. There's going to be an earthquake. It's going to happen, because we live in the West and it's going to happen. And it's almost like we lubricate. I mean, the function isn't, like greasing. It's by increasing the pore pressure. But we facilitate the earthquakes. We don't, so to speak, create it. And the concern is that if we were to have a magnitude 5.5, which is they project as the upper limit, there's a little community of Paradox there, there's a little school, what are the potential threats to property and life? And so that's what Reclamation's trying to avoid. And so now we're injecting more down in the area of about 3,600 PSI. And
you're looking to put in another injection well too?
Well, the states are against another injection well,
Yeah.
even though it would be further removed and into a different fault block that maybe has more assimilative capacity. If we went out to that other fault block and we started injecting and we spend, $65 million on a well, and 5 years later we have a big earthquake, then we're just closed. And so we are pushing Reclamation to look more seriously at the zero liquid discharge or the evaporation pond alternative. One of the things that we're fighting against is the Bureau of Reclamation made some assumptions right at the end of the EIS process. One is that they made the assumption that whatever salt is produced by evaporation pond alternative or zero liquid discharge alternative cannot be exported from the valley, that there's not an interest or a market for that salt. And therefore it's got to stay in the valley, and the only way to dispose of it is to create a landfill. And that landfill would be, 100 feet high ultimately after 50 years and with the salt in there. And then the Department of Interior then said, we're not going to accept a salt landfill on federal land. So with the assumption and then the taking of the position.
They'd rather have it in our land. Huh?
Yeah, that's right. And what they did is.
All spread out.
That's right,
Yeah,
it's all spread out,
out.
is they effectively killed those two alternatives.
Yeah.
I mean, that assumption, and so we're back to reclamation saying baloney, we got to relook at that assumption, and in fact, we have an entity that is interested in the salt, and that we could haul it off, and obviously there'd be transportation costs and those kinds of things, but, so we're trying to get them to reevaluate that.
Okay. Good luck.
Okay.
Good. Well, thank you for the
All right,
presentation.
a great presentation, thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we're going to go back up to 8E. This is the water supply assessment and supply verification for Desert Retreat. Good morning, Zoe.
Good morning, President Powell, members of the board. This request consists of seeking approval for the water supply assessment and verification for the Desert Retreat project. So the project proposes to develop approximately 377.7 acres located between 38th and 40th Avenue in Jefferson and Madison. This is in the city of Indio, but within Coachella Valley Water District's municipal service area. The project, as proposed, consists of 1,500 detached single-family residential homes, approximately 26 acres of clubhouse and club guardhouse use, a 5.4 acre irrigation lake, 136 acres of open space, and two small areas, 2 acres and 1 acre respectively for an IID substation and CBWD well site. The total projected water demand for the project is 1,096.97 acre feet per year, which is approximately 2.9 acre feet per acre. And it is anticipated that the non-residential outdoor demand, approximately 455 acre feet per year, would be met with non-potable water. So staff have assisted in the preparation of the water supply assessment and verification in accordance with the requirements of California law, and have concluded that based on the projected demands and the projected outlooks on supplies based on current and future, there is sufficient supplies to meet the project demands, and recommends that the board approve the water supply assessment and verification.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a couple questions. Zoe, the 2.9 acre feet per acre, is that do we have a standard in terms of our ordinance for development on projects like this? And does this 2.9 fall within that standard?
So the answer is yes. We do have standards for indoor use and outdoor use. For indoor use, this uses the current guidance of 55 gallons per capita per day. For outdoor use, this does use the calculations from our landscape ordinance. So the development is in keeping with those standards. Now for the clubhouse and guardhouse, we use AWWA standards, but those should be in keeping with the overall requirements.
Okay, great. And then on the non-potable water source for this project, it looks like it's just be south of Warp 7, I think it is. And then
That is correct.
And then also call it the canal, Coachella Canal comes on the southeast corner. What would that non-potable supply be? Would it be a blend of Colorado River and reclaimed water, or one or the other?
The project is within the expansion area for Ward 7, so it is foreseen at this time that it would be a blend.
Okay, all right. And would that non-potable supply, I know that this runs from Madison to Jefferson, and so there were some projects along Jefferson that were delayed because of non-potable projects. I don't know why they were delayed, but would that be part of that general area project going forward?
I'd have to defer to engineering on it because I don't want to misspeak, but I know that we checked with engineering and this is within the master plan's expansion area. So there is a roadmap for getting this user on non-potable water. Within the water supply assessment itself, it does mention that they would, as required, have some backup wells and may, would initially, depending on when the project is actually constructed, would need to use that. Now, I want to note that per our landscape ordinance, we allow slightly more water use when recycled water is being used. So if they use the wells, then their actual budget when they do their plan checks, et cetera, would actually lower. And I'll let Carrie add anything to that.
I just wanted to address your comment about the Warp 7 non-potable water projects on Jefferson Street. Those were bundled with a current funding application to get clean water SRF loan and grant. So this project, we would have to, because the water supply assessment is part of the environmental, we have to have the environmental complete and the plans at least at 90% before we can submit as part of a funding application. So this would probably be packaged in a future funding application for a non-potable water connection.
Okay, all right, great, thanks, no, that's helpful. And then in the package, there was a list of water supply assessments that we've done over the years. And some of them have been completed and the projects are done. Some of the projects have been suspended and then some have been actually expired. So I guess I'd like a little discussion about what happens to those water supply assessments that have been that have expired. And then I didn't bring I forgot my notes, but I added them up and it was about 13,000 acre feet of supplies and kind of suspended or expired. What happens to those as we go forward?
So I can talk a little bit about the procedure that we currently take. On an annual basis, if a water supply assessment is to become expired, we now send a letter to the developer and the lead agency. So that gives them an opportunity to ask for an extension if the project is still viable. And we work with them with some flexibility on the time to work through any request for an extension. If we do not hear from them, then it does become expired, and if they reapproach us with the project, we'll evaluate if a new water supply assessment is needed at the time. Now, we do have some water supply assessments that they quite back in time that did not have an expiration date. And generally, we've kept those on the list. You may notice that this is a slightly reformatted list. Given the fact that we just developed a new alternative plan, Indian Basin Water Management Plan, we are planning on contacting not just this year, not just those that are expiring, but all those that don't have an expiration date, but we deem that they will likely need to be redone. And so that would help to align those water supply assessments with our current planning assumptions. and to have a more updated list in terms of viable projects.
Okay, yeah, some of those older projects, I'm sure, were approved under very different circumstances than we have today. So, no, thanks for the discussion, appreciate that.
You know, I'm just trying to figure out what they're, I mean, I'm looking at the map on page 2, and there must be, and in comparing it to the table on page 3 that's on the screen, there must be a lot of community landscaping that's not really depicted on the map, because there's a fairly large lake, a couple lakes, and that looks like that's going to use, I'm assuming that's the irrigation lake.
Correct.
41.
No other, the developers, the only lake will be for irrigation purposes.
I know. Well, there's a little lake on the north, and then this one's kind of a long lake, and it looks like it crosses a street, so probably 3 lakes total. But I don't know. So the evaporation on the lakes is 41 acre feet, and then there's irrigation, quite a bit of irrigation on between open space and street open space. I mean, that's 330. That's almost the same amount of irrigation as the residential itself for outdoor, which is 350. So there must be a lot of community landscaping, I guess. So the front yards maybe are all irrigated with this lake, and then the backyards are with domestic? I don't know. I mean, I can't tell by looking at it.
So the plan as described, as we were working with the developer to get a handle on those numbers, the plan is to use, like I said, to use non-potable for the non-residential areas. So the assumption is the residential areas would be irrigated with domestic.
I know. Well, yeah, but open space private streets using 166. I can't imagine that's all streetscapes. It seems like front yards to me.
It can't be, they'd have to have separate.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Because you have open space, but the only open, I mean, you put open space together, the 2 open spaces, and you're at 330 acre feet, which is almost the same number for the residential. In fact, when you add in the lake evaporation, it's more than the residential.
President Powell, we have somebody here from MSA that is working on the design of this project. If it's appropriate, you could answer some of these questions.
You know, I mean, I guess my question is, are the front yards going to be irrigated with the non-potable? Was that part of the open space, or how does this work?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Marcos Serrano with MSA Consulting.
Morning.
The intent is to irrigate all the open spaces areas, very similar to the Pulte Rancho Mirage project, the Del Webb at Rancho Mirage.
Right.
You know, bring as much lush as possible, but yet still be desertscape. So all the open spaces will essentially, you know, try and make this as enticing as a project as possible.
Well, but where are those open spaces?
Go back to
Because all I see is a little spot in front of the clubhouse, or whatever that is.
from 40th Avenue all the way up to that Spine Road.
Yeah.
That's one of their grand entries, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
The area on the north, just south of 38th Avenue, that lake area, that's essentially the delivery, the non-potable delivery pond. And then the other pond will be used for circulation. I don't know that the developer has accepted or will be creating ponds over by on the east side. They're probably, the current plans that they've developed only show ponds right in front of the clubhouse. And that's where the recirculation and distribution system is going to be. But they have, a lot of the Pulte projects have trail systems, and this is one that is also intended to have that type of trail system with landscaping in all the areas. And you can see there's lots of spaces between the homes and whatnot. So all of those are going to be some sort of trail, dog walk, you know, things like that.
Okay. All right, I think that answers my question. I guess it would have been useful to color it, yeah. That would have made a difference. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And I have one question too, just kind of going off of the colors here on the legend. I heard you say something about a well site being dedicated, but I heard the number 1, but I see three of them. Are we getting 3? Are we getting 1? Are those just potentials? What's going on there?
So for the purposes of whether it's one site or multiple sites, which obviously they wouldn't be the same site. So the acreage used in the water supply assessment is the aggregate expected area that would be dedicated to well sites.
So based on the number of acres and our well site land ordinance policy, it is 3 well sites, and then one of those sites will be an active well and pumping plant.
Okay, and then just remind me, the trigger is like 120 acres or something? Is that why?
I can't remember off the top.
But there's a
90
yeah.
acres or 100, yeah.
There's a trigger on the acreage.
There's a trigger on the acreage, and then it's based on hydraulic modeling, and there's usually a rule of thumb
Okay.
on how many homes triggers a well site.
Okay, that answers my, so we're getting 3 well sites, one of them's gonna get developed.
Right.
Thank you.
And the other ones are just there for,
The other ones are there for future,
so if the well goes out, you have another spot to go.
exactly, or if they're also there as smaller projects build that may not necessarily trigger a well site, but over time and accumulate so that we, the demands trigger us to drill another well. We have locations to drill that well.
Do we end up owning those pieces?
Yes, we do. Yes.
And maintaining them?
Yes. Well, we maintain the interior. If they're within a development like this, the HOA maintains the exterior. Yeah.
They'd probably put a block wall around
They would probably put a block wall.
Or a fence.
it. Doubtful they'd put a chain link fence.
With the oleanders.
Ficus.
All right, well. Yeah, I don't see anything that would prevent us from voting yes on this.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passed 5-0. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe.
Okay. Written communications were, what did we have there? There were 3 that were included in the board packet. They all show as resolved. Okay. And then we've had our first information. There's another one on the next gen CMMS implementation update. Good morning, Dan.
Hi. I will try to be brief.
I bet you will.
But I don't want to underplay the importance of this implementation for the next 10 to 15 years of our operations. So bear with us for maybe 10 minutes. So first of all, we just want to give you an update of what we've been working on over the last 5 years with the computerized maintenance management system. I think we've made great strides. I'm just going to give you a brief background, and then I'll turn it over to Susan Bowman, who is our asset management program coordinator. We were very blessed. She's been working in asset management for over 20 years with City of San Diego and Valecitos. So she had working knowledge of, to help us get over the finish line. So we're very pleased. Good. So this project has been 5 years in the making, and we spent more than $5 million and, tens of thousands of hours to get to get to this point, but it truly is going to save us a lot of money, and data is power moving forward, and to be able to mine that data and make informed decisions is paramount to optimization of our future and cost savings as we move forward. So the first thing that we had to do was collect our assets. We didn't have a real GIS platform, so we went in the field, asset by asset, and we got geospatial information of every valve, every asset, where it is located, the long and lat, and we worked with IS and our GIS team to actually build a GIS platform that is extremely robust and 21st century information that we have. We actually have 140 layers over the 6 enterprise funds. So not only have we implemented a CMMS program, which just went live last Monday, we're very pleased with that. It's somewhat of a soft launch since we had to work with our somewhat antiquated ERP system. So we'll have to do some reconciliation when we get a new ERP, but we're very proud and we're very happy that we're actually live now with the program. So we collected 310,000 assets worth over $1.5 billion. Concurrently, we worked with NextGen, which is a second generation asset management program. So I think we're very fortunate as well to have state-of-the-art as far as software application. And we found a way to communicate with our SunGard system through a lot of work with IS and Central Square, which was fantastic. So we can communicate because the labor will continue to be in executive time until we have a new ERP, as the warehouse will stay in SunGard as well. And we push that information over into NextGen to have the costs associated with every work order. Concurrently with the asset management implementation, we developed a very onerous and difficult preventative maintenance program. So we did it on spreadsheets, and believe it or not, I had every group go hour by hour what they do preventative maintenance wise, or what is required on every asset. And it took us about a year to do it really well, but they can tell you weekly, quarterly, annual preventive maintenance requirements on every asset that we have down to the hour, not only by division, but also by asset. So if you said, what's the preventive maintenance in the electric shop, I can give it to you by the hour. If you say, what is the preventive maintenance on a well site, I can give you all the divisions that worked on that well site during the year to the hour. And what we're able to do is take that information, though painful and with some hesitation, we were able to get everybody thinking differently on what is required, and then we were able to take that information and put into a CMMS program. So if you can imagine, we set everything up by geo. So if you look at a square mile or a township and range and section, if you had 500 fire hydrants in there, you can preventatively put it into the program and somebody working the 500 hydrants in there, and then it automatically links to the next geo to start the next 500 hydrants and what the requirements are in that. So it's a very sophisticated program, and we're really proud of it. And as far as testing and training, I'll leave that to Susan here in a moment. So what are the benefits of an asset management program? It does not tell us what we need to replace. It gives us data to make informed decisions for, to determine where we're going to spend funding for competing interests. So these are some of the questions that it does answer. And, what do we own? We compiled 310,000 assets. Where is it located? We have the geospatial information. The GIS is actually located, or the GIS actually comes into NextGen, and we work off the GIS platform. While we were doing the geospatial information, we determined what the condition was of each of the assets. So each asset has a rating as compared to other similar assets in the group. We determined and put into the system what the install dates. We use as-built drawings and as such to determine when it was built and how much time potentially is left on it. And as we do preventative maintenance, our goal is to extend that time or the useful life of the asset, which is a huge cost savings. We also looked at how likely it is to fail and what are the consequences of failure, because they are different. And then we developed a risk matrix for each asset, and what is the importance of that related to other similar assets again. The preventive maintenance program, even before we implemented this, we have been tracking it on a spreadsheet. And my team has been tasked with increases of preventative maintenance by 10% every year moving forward. And they hit most of the goals this year. So again, this year, we're going to try to do another 10%. And the more preventative maintenance we do, the less reactive maintenance will be required. So we're very pleased about that. And, what is the intent? The intent is to make sure we're in service as much as possible, so to maximize the level of service moving forward. And then as you turn the dial from reactive to preventative, it does, as I said, extend the life, and it does help us determine where to focus our competing funding requirements from a capital perspective. So before I turn it over to Susan, I just really want to thank engineering and Elmer for the work they're doing. We're actually, as new assets are built, we have a program to put them into the CMS program upon notice of completion. We work with finance and payroll and the warehouse to determine how to function between the two and bring over the costs. We work with Luis's group, IS, and our GIS group to make sure that we could talk to the existing SunGard and then build this robust GIS platform. And then we just promoted Valerie in the red over here, who is getting her 20 years next month. She is our new CMMM specialist that'll work under Susan. So we're building a team in asset management. And again, this is going to set up the next decade of what we do in operations. And the intent is reduce costs and optimize and have data to make informed decisions. So.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here. This has been a great project. I was glad to bring it over the finish line, so thank you very much. And I'm going to just get into a little bit of detail and show you within NextGen where some of our data resides, et cetera. So as Dan said, the CMMS really has a strong role in bringing us into the world of asset management as a business practice. And this slide just demonstrates as an example of different ways that we can do analysis using the data that we'll now be collecting within the maintenance management system. Data that's much more granular, much more detailed than we were collecting with the Naviline system. And it will really be able to use those preventive maintenance programs to give us information to make more informed decisions, which ultimately will lead to cost savings in how we manage, how we maintain, renew, replace our assets. So a CMMS is a computerized maintenance management system, and what are its capabilities, and in particular the capabilities of the selected solution NextGen. So we have now built a common database, and the nomenclature of our assets is standardized. So we have collected all of that information. As we said, it's in the GIS, and it's a lot of additional data points are collected and will be maintained over time as we switch out the assets. That information will be tracked. We'll know if we've replaced a pump with a new pump, all of that sort of thing. So common naming of our equipment is critical. Standard work processes. So across the department, the way that we are tracking the work that we perform is standardized because we're using a system that allows us to track specifically. We're linking all of that information to the equipment, to the asset, and even sometimes to the components of the asset. So not every little light switch is an asset, but it can be tracked as a component, as an equipment, as a replacement part, et cetera, as we go through and start doing our work using the maintenance management system. Certainly a key part of a maintenance management system is preventive maintenance planning. As we say, we have developed preventive maintenance program using spreadsheets and other known information to gather that, but now we have a sophisticated computer system which follows along the work we do. It triggers the work orders to come out based on a scheduled date. It could be used to be based on condition findings. There's a number of criteria that can be used to trigger the preventive maintenance. Ultimately, we can even move into predictive maintenance. So anticipating when something, not just preventing a failure, but actually anticipating prior to a failure using predictive analytics and other predictive methods that are available. Information collection for reporting. So I think at the end of the day, the most critical information that we're gathering, we use that for analysis. So that's really core reason for implementing a maintenance management system. Standard functionality, of course, work order tracking. If nothing else, helping our crews know where to go every day, The supervisors can manage and schedule workout over the week, over the month, whatever the case may be. So scheduling the crews is also a critical function of a maintenance management system. And then lastly, as mentioned here, the inventory control. So what materials, spare parts, et cetera, are we procuring? Is there work that's being held up because we're waiting for materials? All of that material management, inventory control as well, not just material management for executing the work, but also for monitoring and tracking what costs are being, where your costs are for procuring inventory, replacement parts, et cetera. It can help us make informed decisions on how we obtain materials over time and maybe even negotiate cost savings in that arena as well. This is just a quick glance at our asset inventory, just to highlight to you the assets counts that we collected. Domestic, over 230,000 assets. The reason that's high, of course, is because the meters themselves are tracked as individual assets. And then all of the other enterprise funds and the asset counts that were collected over the last few years. This is just to show you one of the tools that was used to collect, and then to show you how it was represented. These are our manholes, and the precision with which the data collection was carried out. Again, this data was loaded into the GIS system, and then this gets reflected back into the next gen and helps our crews identify exactly what, if there's a report coming in from the public, exactly what manhole it may be that needs work, or that they're calling in on. So this was just the methods that were used to collect the manhole inventory data. And also with that, another effort that was undertaken as we collected the data is we identified and labeled all of our assets in a very, as I say, consistent manner. So throughout the district, we applied these yellow tags. We call them the QR inventory tags. If we looked around the room, we could probably find at one of the thermostats, not quite, yeah. If you find one, you get an award. These QR codes are applied on all of our assets, as you can see these examples, and it's really helpful to the crews in the field. So another aspect of this is that the crews in the field have information at their fingertips. So they can scan with either their phone, their iPad, or any other mobile device. They can scan that QR code and it will tell them exactly what asset they're looking at. So there's no uncertainty about what they're working on. And as we mentioned, the condition assessment was a critical part of our asset collection. We collected over 300,000 assets, and with that, we did do, an educated assessment of the condition of those assets, and that information is recorded in our CMMS. As we say, this will inform us on our risk assessments. So both looking at the consequences of the failure and the probability of the failure, we can focus our resources on higher risk assets. And this is important for both day-to-day maintenance activities as well as the long-term renewal and replacement planning, is to understand exactly where to focus your efforts on higher risk assets. This is a quick look at what the next-gen asset management system looks like when we go in and we look at an asset. This is the screen that our users get, and this is the same screen that the folks in the field, all of our crews, are able to see as well. Even has a little picture there. They can upload pictures as needed. That information is just knowledge sharing, knowledge gathering is again, the core part of this that we can use going forward. Going from corrective to preventive. This is our goal. This is where we see the cost savings. It's a lot less expensive to perform routine, standard preventive maintenance than it is to deal with a reactive way where there's an unanticipated failure. We can balance out the budget needs over time, and that's where our goal is to get to where we're doing proactive work and then we're documenting it within the system. This is a quick peek of what a preventive maintenance plan looks like within the next-gen system. These are all listed on the screen here, are different PM plans. This is O&M domestic, they have codes to them. These codes do mean something to the crews, and they use this to schedule all of the maintenance over the year. So getting ready for the deployment, again, like we said, it was a 5-year effort, but certainly within the last 6 months, our goal was to be fully prepared, ensure that all of our staff, both O&M and non-O&M staff, was trained and prepared for this new system. We have NextGen University, which was developed by the NextGen company in conjunction with CVWD, which was computer-based training. So over 250 of our employees reviewed that. And then we had hands-on instructor-led training. Over 100 supervisor crew chiefs received training, all of our O&M staff. And then we also trained over 100 employees on work order entry. These were employees who are outside of the O&M department, but have an interaction with the NextGen system. So we trained them to make sure that they were prepared as well for this transition. We did specific training for meters and backflows, development services, customer service, billing, and meter readers, because they had, their business processes were impacted by the implementation of NextGen. A lot of support resources. We had a lot of help from the NextGen project managers. We had Black & Veatch on board. We also had what were called power users within our organization to really help people go through this transition. And mobile devices, this is really key to the data collection. We collect the data right there in the field when they're working on an asset, when they're doing, putting in their labor, et cetera. So we deployed, we trained, and utilized a lot of iPads that were already deployed, but we trained on the over 140 iPads have a application that's specifically written for the iPad. We're also able to leverage the existing iPhones that the district has. So the NextGen system has an app that they download from our internal app store that allows them to access all of this information on their phone. And then we had 30 Toughbooks already in use in the district, and we used those. So we went through and did a lot of preparation for our crews, for everyone else in the district that was impacted. As we said, we have been live now for 8 days. We're it's going
You haven't
well.
broken yet, huh?
We are fine-tuning the system. It was a soft rollout. And as we move forward, we're going to continue to optimize and enhance the system. And I think that it really brings the district forward on the use of applications to optimize operational effectiveness for the district. So, any questions?
Great, yeah. Yeah, it's good to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question. That last slide was really interesting. I had questions about that.
Sure.
You know, but I think throughout the presentation, what was mentioned is that this is dependent on a lot of information gathering, right? And you talked about and that's what I was thinking about was how are you going to gather this information? And you hit on the training. You did a lot of training. You've provided a lot of support resources like that's what I was trying to get at the work processes. And then how are you gathering all that information? And you've mentioned all the technology that you've kind of deployed to do that. And so it sounds like you've set the base for it. But what I'm thinking now is if you're going to track, if you have a plan to track if in fact the folks out in the field are using the devices, do you have a threshold that you can look at to make sure that information is being gathered? Because you have all these devices out there in the field, but are they used or are they not used, or is there a frequency of usage that you can track to make sure that information is being gathered? It's not being gathered. You'd like to see more information gathered across all the different sectors that you're tracking. So any insight on that, on how can you gauge if you feel comfortable with the amount of information that's being gathered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point is that we need to know that users are using it. First of all, we need to know that they're comfortable with the technology, that the training was effective, and that we're meeting our goals of the data collection. So with that, there's a number of ways for us to do that. The next-gen system itself is quite robust in the tracking of activities and even transitions of a status of a work order to one or another. It makes a record when that data entry occurs. It's time-stamped, et cetera. So there's a lot of just standard internal tracking. And with that information, we can do internal audits and see how frequently staff is using the system to make changes, how frequently it's a crew person who would presumably be in the field using an iPad, so we have statistics on that, versus having a supervisor enter the data later in the office. So with all of that data collection, we'll be able to audit and also, again, look out for areas where there might be gaps in the knowledge of the users to really make sure that we are collecting that.
Yeah, and I would say that right now even, we can show that as of June 30th, for the previous fiscal year, we were in the range of 230,000 hours of preventative maintenance. And, 1,700 per employee, I mean, that's 130 employees type of thing. So we are turning the dial, and we are trying to be more proactive with the best interest of extending the life of all our assets and saving costs, so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Dan, I just want to say congratulations. I mean, it seems like yesterday that you were pitching this idea to us in 2017, right when I got on the board. And,
Goes quick.
And it seemed like, a big task. I mean, but, it's taken 6 years and you're here. It'll be interesting to see. You don't have all the useful data that you're going to really use. It's going to take some time to gather that and then go through and figure out what's useful and what's not. So.
And when you think about it, like, we're going to, once you have a baseline in history, you're going to be able to go to a well site and say, okay, the last 5 times an electrician was here, this was the problem. So the diagnostics and the information to be able to mine that and use that immediately is going to be huge savings moving forward. So yeah, it was a team effort, really happy. Obviously again, we're going to have to reset with the new ERP, but honestly, with the new SCADA master plan, with the CMMS, with the new GIS platform that's really robust, I really feel like we're in the 21st century with some of these operational optimization components. And it's refreshing to know that at least we're going live and we're learning as we go. So thank you.
Could you define ERP for me?
Enterprise Resource Planning or Financial, SunGard, Navaline.
Okay, got it.
Central Square now. I think the owner has switched names 4 times since we implemented in 2007, but yes.
Fair enough, thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the manhole covers?
You got all these questions.
You looking for the one near your house?
I'm looking for something I have no idea what it means. So on the right side, what talks about average horizontal accuracy, and then below that, I have no idea what that is. And then below that, bad elf average. What are those? Can you talk about that?
Well, basically, just to be, you're dealing with satellites and GPS information, and all it means is it's accurate within basically 2.5 feet. So imagine we have 70,000 valves in the system, and we have a platform where we can go to one specific valve, and we know that we're within 2.5 feet every time we go to one, in theory. I mean, there's a huge value to that. Some of the facilities are underground and are located in very unique areas. So it provides us the level of accuracy. And I have to admit that it is really refreshing that all the assets technically belong to us from an operation maintenance perspective, anything that's in service. But the GIS platform under Doug Breeden and Luis, they really take the quality control seriously, so they consider their assets as well. And all the QAC on new assets coming in, it's a very nice, refreshing thing that everybody takes it seriously, and the importance of making sure that it's correct and updated accurately moving forward. So.
Okay, great. Good job. Thank you.
So I have another question. The next gen platform, is that, they go out with their iPads and they have this platform, or is it on the ArcGIS, like a Discover platform they go on to access these assets? How does that work?
Yeah, the application, the NextGen application is provided by the NextGen company. And what they do is they just pull in our GIS, so there's a map display of real time of what we have in GIS. But the application that's web-based, it's a cloud-based service, as well as the apps from Apple are all developed by NextGen.
Okay, thanks.
You know, I really like that you brought up, Director Aguilar, the manholes, and Dan, you threw out a number of like 70,000 valves. And I think it's great that you have this because it's such a big network. I'm sure you lose manhole covers and valve covers when, all the cities pave or the county paves. And at least now you have a sense that, hey, there needs to be a valve right there and it's gone. And so I think this is very neat.
Yeah, it's again, we have a baseline, it's a history, it's going to take time to get more and more sophisticated, but you have to have the baseline before you can optimize and get better based on the baseline. So we're really excited about it, and thanks for the support, providing the funding, and Jim for his support and pushing us along. And we're hoping that we go from here and get more sophisticated as we move forward. So thanks.
I really want to thank Dan's leadership in delivering this. I know there's been a lot of folks, a lot of support behind the scenes. Thanks, Susan, for finally coming over to us. And Valerie, good luck. You got a little baby here you got to take care of moving forward.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But I also want to appreciate the fact that we're once again leaving one of Tom Levy's euphemisms behind. He used to say, and was very proud of the fact, that he had the best firemen in the region. And that's because of the emergency responses that they did on a recurring basis, which leads me to believe, why did you need to have an emergency? Why are you proud of the fact that you had an emergency response? What you should have been doing is figuring out what you needed from a preventive maintenance to kind of diffuse those situations before they occurred. And I think it is important for us moving forward to understand our responsibilities to the ratepayers to avoid those disruptions, which are costly not just for us, but for them, but also be able to help in future requirements where we can say staffing now is approached differently because we know what our work requirements are and we know what the inability to meet those requirements will produce. So very happy that we've got data to manage by, and I am looking to staff to make a lot of data-driven decisions when we come to the board. I think it helps us tell a more believable, factual story. So very, very pleased with where we are with this.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Me too. But stuff's still going to break.
We're about 50% preventative now. Our goal is to get to 80. But yeah, we do fight fires every night.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, good. Board general comments, Director Nelson.
Oh, gosh, there's a lot going on. As you probably have heard, the State Water Project went up to 30% from 10, so that means an additional about 50,000 acre feet to the district. And in that determination, they didn't even consider any of the January snowfall, so snowpack. So my anticipation is go up to 50 later this month. And that's if you want to take the over/under on that, I'd be happy to. And California, I mean, we're 160% of snowpack for the state. Now, Northern California is only about 116%, but there's still a lot of central Sierras that makes it to the pumps. So that looks fantastic. Colorado River snowpack is good, not quite as good as California. And it's sitting at 123% of average, or about 87%. But the runoff into Lake Powell was 3.49 million acre feet last year. It's forecasted to be 7.45 this year. So, I mean, that's a lot of water. Looks much better. There's your 2 million. That's right. Not quite, because we're still in a functional deficit. Yeah. So, but close, Anthony. Nice try. And LADWP, oh my gosh, Mammoth is like, go skiing up there, it's 240% of normal. So it's got a lot of snow up there. So hopefully Matt and LADWP can make some deals this year and use some of that water. San Luis looks pretty good. It's 72% of capacity, and the California share is about 80% full. So supplies are looking really good. There's a Colorado River Board meeting tomorrow, and it's actually here in Palm Desert at our facility. So be sure and avail yourself. Everybody's invited. Since it's local, we're going to have a little walking tour out to the recharge pond out there and look at that. So
Is that tour after the meeting or before?
After.
Okay.
Yeah. So at noon, and there's sandwiches and stuff. So
What time does the meeting start?
Meeting starts at 10. Goes to about 11:30 noon, and might get out of here a little bit sooner than that. So we can just go look at the ponds and see what we're doing. So thanks, Robert, and Conservation Department, Scott's department, for helping to set that up, and appreciate it. And that's all the comments I have.
I'm good. Yeah.
I'm good, no comments.
Thank you for the reminder, Peter, on the meeting tomorrow. I'll be here tomorrow. I did get a text by Director Hamby saying, "Hey, make sure you show up tomorrow. It's local now." He was excited about doing the rotation. So he just reminded me about that. Oh, and that's when he sent me. He's the one that sent me a video that I shared with Jim and John this weekend. It's a 1985 CBWD video that I think we recirculated during our 100-year anniversary. It's called "And the Desert Turned Green," and it's a very neat 30-minute video with very the old historical shots of the employees of the district and the things that they were doing back then, which was so advanced and state of the art. And you look at the pickup trucks and they look really old. The Sanjeros used to drive these old school pickup trucks, and anyways, it's a cool video. Maybe I put it in the email and I'll send it out to everybody, but it's called And the Desert Turned Green. Yeah. It's a neat video. Also been in conversations with the Assembly Member's Office on particular issues related to chromium-6, and I've been talking to him on, kind of wearing this hat, wearing other hats, and there might be a way to do something similar to that was done with PFAS, and so that's kind of in the works. As that continues to take shape, maybe we'll ask for some sort of letter of support from the district, other folks, but that's still very new. There are some meetings being scheduled with Adán Ortega to talk about it further today. I did talk to the Assembly member yesterday, and he's very open to trying to do something. So it's in general just to create funding in the same way that funding was created for PFAS. I think for PFAS, it was not necessarily new funding. It was just kind of tacking it onto existing funding. So at minimum, it's going to be something like that, and with the hopes that maybe we can create a new pot of money. But again, just very preliminary. We'll give you more later. Thank you.
Good, yeah. I'll plan to be at the CRB meeting too.
Oh, great.
Looking forward to seeing them since I missed Vegas. It's just thinking about the water in California and the drought emergency, and whether there's any discussion of the governor rescinding the drought emergency, and if that happens. I haven't heard any of that. I don't know if it's happening or not, but it's logical that it would. And and I don't recall if our drought penalties go away immediately when that happens, or do we need to take action? And if so, we should make sure we have an agenda item to take that action.
Will do, but I'll give Victoria an opportunity.
Victoria,
Hi.
yeah,
Good
sure.
morning, President Powell, members of the
Yeah.
board. So the governor yesterday issued a new executive order talking about drought and then the extreme weather that California has been having. And he essentially has kept everything in place for now. He's asked that state agencies get back to him, I believe, April 26th.
April.
By end of April to discuss, are there any other measures that should be taken, or should we be taking a step back from any of the current measures? And then he also talked about some of the well permitting language that was also in the past executive orders.
So that implies that the drought emergency is going to remain in effect until
At
after
least
that
until
April
correct.
April 26th.
26th. That's the end of April.
End
Wow.
of April.
It's another 2.5 months. Hmm. Okay. It seems that it doesn't really line up with the hydrology reality.
Yeah, John, it's interesting though, when you think about Southern California in particular, metropolitan area. When you've got 15% of the, how did that go? I forget I forget the statistics, but when you have state water project going into the LA basin, and you have Colorado River that is at such risk right now, it's still for LA a big issue in terms of supply, because they're going to make up some on the state project, but they're not going to completely replace that. So for metropolitan, it's still a big issue of supply, and I think that it's probably prudent. I think it's probably a good idea to wait till April for that, and maybe they do something regionally. But Matt has gone into this emergency situation, and that's where they need to be there. So maybe it's like support for Southern California.
Yeah, it might be a regional drought declaration.
Yeah.
But that just doesn't seem to line up with what's happening in the rest of the state with reservoirs.
Oh, for sure. Just what I said about the snowpack and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all my comments. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Hearing none, let's get into the meetings. We had January 25th, Golf and Water Task Force. Actually have the minutes for that because it was a while ago. We had a meeting. That was the one that Jim, I think Craig was out of town that day, right?
Yes. Jim Schmidt.
Schmidt was chaired. Standard fare. We just went over all the usual stuff.
I think some water budgets together and talking about that, and talked about their big meeting that they had and turnout. Seems like there's more interest in that. More people are coming to that meeting than we've had previously.
Yeah, I think Jim opened the meeting by essentially reinforcing the fact that this is their meeting, it's an industry meeting, and we're there to help support as consultants. But
What's important, yeah.
it's really, the industry itself needs to be aware that they have a responsibility. And there are some folks that continue to show up, and there are some other folks that we've never seen.
Yeah, I get it. I agree. Okay. January 26th, Salton Sea Authority, Director Nelson.
Yeah, so that meeting was down in Imperial. I attended remotely. The Bureau, IID, Coachella, and the state put on a informative meeting about the cooperative agreement of how the Bureau was funding the state of California with the $250 million of commitments up to 250 with water conservation, with both Coachella and Imperial. And so it was a effort by those 4 agencies to communicate with the Salton Sea Authority, answer questions about the methodology of the coming up with the 250 million, the assumptions by the state of what those exposed playa might be with additional conservation. So I thought it went rather well, and so that was that.
Good. January 27th, we had a meet and greet with Agua Caliente and DWA and ourselves, just the principles on our agua mediation, and it was mainly to get Jeff Bowman, who's a new director there, and he's one of the principals on the mediation, kind of get him into the fold a bit. Went well. Good. January 30th, Bureau of Reclamation webinar, Director Aguilar.
Yeah, so I was interested in hearing what the Bureau staff had to say, at least on what was happening to date on the comments. So they had 2 members from the Bureau that were doing the presentation via Zoom webinar. They received over 2,000 letters of comment. They sort of summarized the comments by category. The majority of the comments, interestingly enough, came from Arizona and from some of the tribes, and they just went over the schedule for what would be happening going forward.
Okay.
Then on the 31st, I had a meeting at my request with staff regarding the State Water Project, our capital improvement program, and I was particularly interested in a discussion around rates for the east and west groundwater rack, and that was really informative, and I appreciate the time from the staff.
Great. And then on February 2nd, we had another principals meeting on this tribal litigation, just with CWD and CBWD and DWA. Again, to kind of get oriented with Jeff Bowman in our positions. Then you want to take the next one?
Okay, that meeting has been rescheduled. It's a meeting with one of the Regional Water Quality Control Board members. Just wanted to introduce staff to the member and talk about some of the things that we're working on, but the meeting has been rescheduled. I think it might be rescheduled for today. The 9th and the 8th, I went up to Sacramento last week on the 9th and the 10th for the Safer Advisory Group. They called it an onboarding meeting. It's the first time that they do something like this. I've been part of this advisory board since it got created back in 2019. So this is my 3rd reappointment to the group for another 2 years. And this year they did this onboarding meeting where they a lot of the State Water Board staff, including the executive director, meet with the advisory group to kind of download what the purpose of the group is. Just get an introduction with the staff, what the role is of the group, what the schedule looks like for the rest of the year. And so it's a 2-day thing. It's all day. And we didn't get into the details because it wasn't one of the official meetings. There's typically 4 meetings during the year where we work with staff to try to set the fund expenditure plan. We try to set priority plans, and we digest all those documents that eventually end up in front of the board for approval. But this meeting, we didn't get into the weeds of that. It was more of a general sense that we would be doing that throughout the year. It was pretty neat to see that as part of the onboarding material and an introduction to the advisory group members, they highlighted a lot of the success and the relationship between the board, the State Water Board, and the Coachella Valley Water District. One of the things that they showed was the presentation that Dan and I gave to the board back in April of last year, which was an item when we requested the $24 million for Avenue 66 and what that whole thing was about. And so I think that the water board continues to use our agency as an example of the types of things that they hope to try to accomplish across the state. So that's, I think we should be very proud of that, that we have that relationship with the water board. There was, during the 2 days, there was a series of different folks from the various departments at the State Water Board that came in to talk about the different roles of the different divisions, whether it was Division of Financial Assistance, whether it was the Division of Drinking Water. We spent a lot of time with Andrew. I have a hard time saying his last name, but I'm sure our staff knows who he is, Andrew Oligat. I'm not even going to try, but he was there, again, executive director of the board was there. They brought the legal team also to talk about conflicts of interest, ethics. They brought in folks for reimbursement. I mean, it was a pretty well done onboarding meeting. Again, it was the first time they did this. On one of the days, I did have a meeting with for lunch. We would break out for lunch on our own. And I did have a meeting with two of the new advisory group members. One, I believe, was from one of the Waterkeeper folks, who's also part of the Berkeley. And then another gentleman, Eric, who works with Community Water Center, who's very involved up in Sacramento, to just talk about emerging issues and some of the priorities that we want to focus on. But yeah, that was the bulk of the meeting. I thought it was well done, and so look forward to the rest of the year. Thank you.
Okay, good. Director Bianca, you have two on the 9th.
So at the CBC meeting, it's 885 acres that was bought above 1,000 palms, long-term conservation. Nice piece, actually, they got. And then our ongoing Chuckawalla National Monument that they've been talking about for the last few months has been, we had some concerns here at CBWD on the long-term impacts of the communities of Coachella, Mecca, and North Shore, ability to grow and us control the flood. And so that they've come back and said, well, we'll change the borders a little bit and we'll do this and we'll do that, but they really never showed us the plan. And I'm also really concerned, so we really haven't had enough time to go through it, the staff at CBWD, but this thing really needs to be vetted. I mean, when I hear words of maybe or could or potentially, those words to me means we can't do it. I mean, if there's any chance of hurting the communities of North Shore and Mecca and Coachella on the long-term growth, then I don't think it's a good idea, especially when a lot of the people that are pushing this aren't the residents there. I mean, we're not hearing from the towns, those towns and those people saying we want this national money. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is going to be a great thing. But I just want to make sure. And so there's not a lot of people who even know about this, and so it's kind of under the radar. So I'm kind of holding up the flag and trying telling people as much as possible, like, we better not just go along with this just because we think it's a good idea, that we better vet this, and vetting is going to take some staff time, and maybe even staff can't even figure it out. Maybe we need to go to somebody else to figure this thing out, because it's a big deal, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure when they did Joshua Tree National Park, I mean, that took a long time, and I bet you the residents really wanted that. We're in a different situation where we have a disadvantaged community where it's all farming, and it's there's not a lot of infrastructure out there to begin with, and that where we're trying to work on that. But we don't want to put ourselves in a bubble to where it can only be farming and disadvantaged forever. I mean, so that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's been something that I've been tracking too, and I actually got to meet with Cindy yesterday on Chacawala and expressed all the various concerns that you've expressed, not just from a CVWD perspective, but also from a East Valley perspective as a resident of the East Valley, as an employee of the city of Coachella. I try to get a sense from her if there was some sort of schedule or timeline that they were trying to meet to make this how do you get to the final proposed boundary? And it didn't seem like there was any real deadline for that. They appear to be in the process of still trying to determine what that boundary is. So she did mention that they would need to have a champion for this up in DC, I imagine, to propose the national monument, and that they think that person is going to be the congressman. So I think that these concerns need to be expressed to the congressman. The things that I mentioned to Sandy was that I had also sent an email personally to the county supervisor expressing the concerns related to the potential negative impacts to the East Valley and its ability to grow if we're not careful as to what it means to really understand what that national monument does. My understanding is that it overlays already existing conservation areas, but I was also trying to get a sense of whether a national monument on top of the conservation areas makes it even more difficult to do any sort of development. I think my understanding is that on the conservation areas, perhaps you could do some land swapping, you could do maybe some other things. I don't know the specifics of that. You might know, William, but I was trying to get a sense, is the overlay even, just absolutely don't touch it? Those are things that she wasn't able to answer, but she says that she was going to get back to the folks in the team that maybe could answer those things. But those are the types of things that I think we need to be asking too, Jim. I did bring up that goes into those Palmas areas also. I don't know, the specifics of our operations there, but I did bring up the East Dike, and I brought up the fact that there was that large flood, the Valentine's flood that happened a few years ago, and the amount of damage that it did there, and we needed to go in there to take care of it, and whether a national monument impacts our ability to do maintenance in the future, things like that. So there's a lot of question marks around this thing, and I did apologize for not being able to go on there. They're doing the rounds. I heard they already got some resolutions of support from DHS. I think they might have gotten one from the city of Indio. So they are going around and collecting these resolutions in support. So there's some movement. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I was aware that they had invited a number of elected officials in the region on these private flights, tours over the Chacawala area or over the East Valley to try to show folks the area that they were trying to bring into the national monument. It sounds like they're going to do a second round of that. So just, if you guys are interested in going on the plane and check it out, it might be another opportunity to do that. I missed the last one, so I might do the next one. But anyways, thank you for bringing that up. I think it is a big concern that if we don't pay attention to it, it could fly under the radar and cause some unintended things down the road. So thank you for bringing that up.
Good. That last one, DVBA, I was not in attendance. So are there any other meetings we need to report on? Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have two on February 10th, which was last Friday. I attended a California caucus on Colorado River. Robert and Jim couldn't make it, so I participated on behalf of CVWD, kind of looking at some next steps. where to go from here on the river. There was thoughts to increase efforts to communicate and collaborate with Arizona on a state-to-state basis, which is good. And then also there was a recognition that there needs to be some communication with the Senate with Padilla and Feinstein's office, because there's been a formation of a Colorado River Caucus from the state senators, and so we need to communicate a little bit more in that realm. So that was pretty much the basics of the meeting. And then on February 8th, I attended a Western Water Assessment webinar on climate informational tools. They are a researched applied-based, science applied-based firm out of Boulder, Colorado. And the tools were in regards to climate change, and it's just different tools to look at that they've developed and aggregated across the country in looking at climate change and its effect on Colorado River. And so I found it very, very interesting to see what some of the tools are. And as you know, I follow the hydrology pretty close, and so trying to see what everyone's up to. So it was very informative.
Great, thank you. Any others?
I'll just mention I sat in on the interfund loan agreement appeal hearing last week, and it was really interesting to watch the three judges, and one of them seemed much more animated than the other two, so I think that was interesting to observe. Jim was there, I know, and we received a summary on that as well, so
yes,
appreciate the opportunity to attend.
Yeah, good. Glad you did. Is there a motion to approve meetings that were reported on?
I'll make the motion.
For approval?
Second.
So we have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passed 5-0. What's next? Closed session, I'm assuming. General manager. Oh, I almost forgot about you, Jim.
It's hard to believe, sir, that you would almost forget about me.
I was going to go to closed session.
The only thing I've got is the COVID update. We've got 3 qualifying cases right now, 4 people off work. So far for the month of February, we had 5 qualifying cases. We ended up the month of January with 10. So maybe we should get a plot on where we are month-wise. It'd be more important than just giving you an update every month. But I think we are in the downturn. That's all I've got, sir.
Son just got it today, but I haven't seen him.
And I will pass, Mr. President.
Pass? Okay. Do we have any departmental reports?
Yes.
Come on up. Come on up.
Introductions.
Yes.
I just want to introduce you to the new engineering manager for domestic water and general district.
Oh, wow.
This is Sabrina Neese. She comes
hello.
to us from a consulting firm in Riverside. She's worked with the district before on the consulting side and knows our standards very well. So I just want to welcome her.
Great.
What department? I missed it.
Domestic water and general district, yeah. She's replacing Dan Reese's position.
Great.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
What was the firm?
Krieger and Stewart.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, great. Welcome.
Welcome, Sabrina.
At this time, the board will recess to closed session to consider the items listed on the agenda. We will reconvene and report out following that. So we're here. Good. We're back, everybody. The regular meeting is hereby reconvened. We do not have any reportable actions from closed session, and with no further business and hearing no objection, we are adjourned.